and welcome to Kicker News. I'm Brianna McCormack.
And I'm Allan Bradbury. Today we have stories for you on what St. John's can do to be more welcoming to come from ways, why you should be skeptical about people selling puppies online, and how social media affects body image.
Our first story today is from Muhammad Ahmed. How can a community be truly welcoming? Well, the city of St. John's has looked to Halifax for help. They sent over Councillor Lindell Smith to give St. John's residents some tips.
This is an ever-growing city. In fact, the province of Newfoundland and Labrador aims to attract about 1,700 immigrants by the year 2022. The city asked Lindell Smith, a Halifax City Councillor, to fly in and give a speech on the subject at an event hosted by Happy City St. John's. Smith is a father and has deep roots in the North End Halifax region. Lindell talked to Kicker about what makes a community welcoming and accepting for newcomers.
Things that work for us is the Welcomed Halifax program, where folks who are refugees or asylum seekers get the 1 year free transit and recreation. So, if that is something that St. John's would think would be beneficial, that'd be great as well.
Helping newcomers to settle in Canada is a challenge.
It's obviously difference of cultures and language barriers are always big difficulties. But really, what it is, it's most times people who are Canadians, people who are from the communities who are more hesitant to welcome, because there's just stigmas around people, depending where they're from and what culture or what they might practice and whatnot. So the difficulties came mostly from people who were just ignorant in not wanting to be welcome.
Talak Chawan came to Canada as a refugee under the government-sponsored program in Nepal. Now he is a youth integration advisor and a child and youth settlement worker at schools in St. John's, helping young newcomers to integrate into the community and in their new schooling system. The city of St. John's has already done so much to make the newcomers feel welcomed.
I think we've already welcomed many people, many newcomers, and it's not just yesterday or today. It's been years of our history in Newfoundland and Labrador. But the thing is, now more than welcoming, we need to be including people into programs, supporting in the way that they feel more included than just being welcoming.
Muhammad Ahmad, Kicker News.
That's the sound of a cold drink being poured into a nice clear glass. And soon, moviegoers will be hearing that sound in theaters, as St. John's and Mount Pearl have greenlit their Cineplex locations to apply for their very own liquor licenses. But how does this change affect moviegoers? Jason Swain, an avid moviegoer, sees this as a smart choice for theaters.
I think it's okay. I don't see any problems with it. I think there's an avenue there to serve alcohol, and given the price point, I don't think you're going to see anybody, consuming huge amounts of alcohol. So,
Jason isn't a parent. However, he doesn't think that the service will have a negative effect on children going to the movies with their parents.
We go to other sporting events, and there's alcohol served at hockey games and basketball games and things like that. I've never seen any, thing get out of hand or anything like that at, say the hockey games and such. So I don't see it being a problem.
Ashley Lee, mother of two, shares a similar opinion, but from a different perspective.
It doesn't bother me. It's great that they can offer that service to everybody. Not everybody's going to be happy about it, but I know that I wouldn't mind a glass of wine at a movie theater. I think it's great.
I contacted Cineplex to get a view of this from the business perspective, but they were unavailable for an interview. Now, patrons just need to wait for this service to go into effect. This is Eric Thomas for Kicker News, St. John's.
About 4 years now. They have
Right now it's currently meant for the post-secondary age, so anywhere from 17 to 25. We have a few people who are a little bit older than that as well, but it's meant to be just a place for people who have faith that can journey in faith a little bit deeper, but also those who have questions about it, who may not be having a journey in faith, but have questions about it for their whole lives. It's a space for them to ask those questions. Mosaic started probably 6 or 7 years ago. It actually was more of an alumni church and what you might term or define as a classic church. It had a children's ministry, met at Munn Chapel, but it's slowly kind of evolved into more of a post-secondary student kind of church in the past probably 3 or 4 years. So the chaplain that was here before me, she made that switch and felt like it should be more geared towards post-secondary students.
I find all I need here in your presence, Lord. I open up my...
The purpose behind it is for those who maybe have had a bad experience with church in the past, or maybe they haven't had a bad experience but they've heard of bad experiences in the church. It just kind of eliminates any threat. It's not a classic church environment. It's a place where many people, they have most of their fun while they're in their university career.
I think it's just to provide me with the space to ask questions when I need to, or the space to try and determine who God is in my life.
It's not a godly concept. Shame doesn't come from God. Shame comes from sin. It actually comes from the enemy or the devil. So let me unpack a fairly straightforward concept for you now. It's the difference in conviction and condemnation. So conviction is what happens to us as Christians when you do other than God's will. Drunkenness has been outside of the will of God ever since God's been dealing with his people. So you ought not get drunk. Do you know why God says you shouldn't get drunk? Because when you are drunk or when you are intoxicated on any substance, you have passed control over your reason and your emotions to that substance.
From playing to producing. Kickers Ella Burke meets with a local poker player to talk about the possibility of starting up a local poker TV show.
My name is Neil King, and I'm 32 years old. I've been playing poker probably since high school. I started. So recently I had an interview Out of the Fog on Rogers. When I was finished up the interview, I recognized the manager, and I went over and had a talk with her about maybe setting up a little poker TV show. She was suggesting that it would have to be a charity event, and we need to find funding in order to get all the necessary equipment. I've considered reaching out to some people who I do play poker with at the local poker games for sponsorships in return for advertising on the TV show. I actually had the idea maybe a year or two ago. I wanted to build a table with my buddy who has a woodworking shop. We never got around to actually doing that, but I do have access to a table now so that if we do get the technology, we can just alter our own table. You build characters, right? So every poker TV show has, locals, has their own celebrity. So if we find enough people who are interested all the time, maybe we can turn it into a more frequent thing and pitch it to, say, Poker Go, which is internet streaming for poker content like Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Well, I'm Paul, and I've been playing here for a little over 10 years. I've been running the game now for maybe 7 or 8. And I started collecting a database of the people who come in, and we've had over 2,200 individuals come through here alone. So that's a lot of people in a small town like this. It'd be interesting to see. It all depends on what the focus is. Like if it's like broadcasting a game, that's one thing. If it's like poker news or whatever, that's another. It could be multifaceted, but it'll be interesting to see if it worked.
My hopes would be to help grow the poker community here in St. John's, which is, I would say, probably 1,300 people strong now, of people who are interested in either poker content or actually playing poker.
I'm Brianna McCormack. You're watching and listening to Kicker Radio on YouTube. Radio produced by the journalism students at College of the North Atlantic. For more great journalism, log on to kickercna.ca and follow us on Twitter at CNA Journalism. For our next story, Newfoundlanders are selling all sorts of things on Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji, even puppies. But are there puppies or is it a scheme? Kicker's Chloe Power is here to talk about the rise of internet puppy fraud.
Puppy scams are on the rise in Newfoundland. Thelma Slaney was scammed back in November when she was looking for a Shorkie puppy. She posted on Kijiji looking for a Shorkie breeder, and someone responded claiming to have just one puppy left. She sent a $250 deposit, and then the warning bells started going off.
Back in November, I put an ad on Kijiji that I was looking for a Shorkie breeder. So the next day, someone answered my ad and said he was a Shorkie breeder in Clarenville. And he had a puppy that was due to leave around the 11th of December. I said, perfect. So anyway, he said the deposit was $250, and he needed it by the end of the day because there's other people inquiring. We decided we would send the deposit. He sent me a puppy contract. I signed it and sent it back. And now, looking back, there was no address on the puppy contract, only Clarenville.
Puppy scammers frequent Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace looking for people to entice with Google images of puppies. Peter Button and his wife Jennifer have encountered 2 puppy scammers since posting an ad looking for a family puppy last week.
They wanted the money up front and right away. They were very persistent on having to send the puppies. Had another lady, but she wanted me to email her $250 to hold them for me without even seeing them.
Slaney and Button advised that when looking for a puppy, Google the breeder. Don't send a deposit without seeing the puppies for yourself. Check Google Images for similar puppy photos. And finally, if the ad sounds too good to be true, it probably is. For Kicker News, this is Chloe Power.
St. John's has seen an increase in armed robberies over the past few years. Any worker would be scared to be held at knife point or gunpoint. Is there anything that can be done to protect workers against these events? Kicker's Griffin Stuckless finds out.
Be a knife or a gun, an armed robbery is a sobering, scary thing. On the 16th of February, the Esso on Newfoundland Drive became one of the many gas stations that have had to deal with such an event. Many workers don't want to talk about what happened when they were held up. This was also the case for the victim at Esso. Thankfully, Keegan Locke, who wasn't the employee that was held up, but is an employee who works at the store, spoke to me about the robbery. What happened that night at Esso?
So it was the weekend, the 16th of February, Esso was robbed, held up. I think it was like around 8 o'clock-ish, typically dead. Like, you know, there's not many people coming by. And I think it was 3 people coming to the store. One of them had like a box cutter or some sort of sharp knife. Just came behind the counter and demanded cash. The cash register be opened.
Did anybody get hurt during the robbery?
No, thankfully no one was hurt, and they're really quick. It was kind of like an in and out. They just wanted the cash. I'm sure everyone's grateful for that.
Even when it's not the employee who was robbed, the tone is immediately apparent. It's not a pleasant thing to talk about, and just hearing the stories can give you a feeling of helplessness. Thankfully, Constable James Cadigan of the RNC says there are some things businesses can do to defend against these robberies.
A lot of businesses in the metro area and nearby communities have began using a buzzer system at the doorway, and it gives them an opportunity to the employees the opportunity to observe, the person who is standing at the door before they enter.
Cadigan also says that CCTV cameras and good lighting have also proven useful in preventing robberies. The rising amount of armed robberies in the city is an alarming statistic. However, there are some things stores can do to not only protect their business, but their employees as well. A camera and buzzer system coupled with brighter lighting seems like a small price to pay for an employee's safety. I'm Griffin Stuckless for Kicker News.
Black History Month is celebrated all over the country to reflect on all great contributions Black people have made in Canada. Kicker's Candy O'Grady is here with us today with a story she did about Black History Month in Newfoundland.
Hi, Tandy. Thanks for being here today.
No problem.
So, Tandy, tell us, why is it important to celebrate Black History Month?
Well, Black History Month is basically a time where we celebrate, the contributions Black people have made here in Canada as well as all over the world, despite all the struggles and setbacks that we have faced.
So this week you worked on a story about Black History Month. What did you find out about Black history in Newfoundland?
To be honest, it felt like I was digging up like some ancient kind of treasure. Most places I contacted didn't have any information about Black history, which was honestly disappointing because there is a history here, but it's just sadly not acknowledged.
And why do you think that's the case? Why do you think Black history isn't acknowledged in Newfoundland as it can be here and as it can be in other provinces?
I mean, I think if you look at the population here, most people are white, so they probably don't really relate to the history or feel connected to it, so I feel like that's why there isn't really this need to learn about it.
What can we do to change this narrative in the province?
I think it starts with like teaching more of the history in schools here on the island, so then at least people get exposed to all the knowledge that's out there, and they can make a choice whether or not they want to care about it, but at least they should be able to have that information, able to access.
What do you think we can do to change the narrative here in Newfoundland? Sorry, I asked the wrong question. Thanks, Tandy, for being here today. And you can see Tandy's story on our website, kickercna.ca.
All right, thank you guys.
Last week we had a story from Matt Haggerty on the state of Newfoundland senior hockey. This week he has a follow-up, looking at Hockey Newfoundland and Labrador's involvement with senior hockey.
The issue of paying and having access to players is causing a rift between the major senior leagues. People are looking for solutions. Barry Manuel was a player coach and manager with the Grand Falls Windsor Cataracts. He thinks Hockey NL should play a bigger role.
You need Hockey Newfoundland through Senior Council to take the bull by the horns and make the decisions that are best for the province overall.
Craig Tolk is the executive director for Hockey NL. He says they take applications from leagues to join their association. Once approved, each league is allowed to have its own governing body as long as it doesn't break Hockey NL's guidelines. Tolk says Hockey NL would have no control on the finances for each league and team under its umbrella, so it doesn't look at the pay or benefits that players could receive. Hockey NL is looking to improve senior hockey besides the East Coast, Central, and Western leagues that currently exist.
When it comes to senior hockey, there's so much adult hockey. There's so much adult hockey that's going on, Matt. That's not even under our umbrella, right? And this is another market that's through Hockey Canada that we're trying to partner with, is to have all of our adult hockey under our umbrella, so that way then we can build. We can build upon our senior structure where you may have senior B, senior C.
The future is uncertain for senior hockey, but Hockey NL says they have meetings with all the leagues and teams regularly and that the herder is important to them and senior hockey. Jonathan Kavanagh, the president and coach for the Conception Bay Blues, shares this belief.
I think the old days of, herders where you saw, Port Basque playing, maybe St. John's or Torbay or Flat Rock, or maybe sometime in our future right now, I think.
For Kicker News, I'm Matt Haggerty.
Want to learn what ancient coins can teach about modern life? With a story on some awesome ancient collections in the province, here is Kicker's Ken Meeker.
Homesteader Steve McBride is counting coins. McBride isn't making a coffee run, however. Some of these coins are thousands of years old.
I realized that there's a very diverse range of coins basically that existed long ago that I find really interesting to study because there are tangible connections to ancient people. First off here I've got a tetradrachma, and these are one of the earliest forms of coinage. This is from about the 4th century BC. Another coin I've got here is a brass coin. This is a Roman metal called orichalcum. This is basically the equivalent of the $20 bill to the Romans. This is what you would have probably plunked down on the counter if you were buying a meal at a tavern. It is showing Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, and his general and right-hand man Agrippa. And this coin is important, I think, because it's kind of one of the foundational events of antiquity, basically, when Rome conquered Egypt. It shows a chained crocodile basically being changed to a palm tree. And this was struck and handed out to the victorious troops after the war was over.
Fellow antiquity collector Mark Smith also has a nifty collection. His collection comprises of Egyptian antiquity, Sumerian, and Roman, among others. Here are some of his favorite antiquities.
This is a piece from Tarentine, modern-day Taranto in southern Italy. Tarentine at the time was a Spartan colony. It was the first Spartan colony. It might have been the only Spartan colony. This is a Corinthian warrior. And if I turn him around, you can see where he had been attached. But this was a mold-formed figure because there's a fingerprint inside. So it was pressed into a mold, and then it was they would have taken thin sticks and strips, and they would have then carved it to make the detail more deliberate. You can get something that's associated with an actual person. That's fantastic, and that's what this piece is. This is an administrative ring, and this is an administrative ring for a Roman governor in Judea, just prior to the turn from BC to AD. Publius Sepulchus Quintus was the Roman governor during the time of Joseph and Mary heading to Bethlehem to answer to the census. He was the guy that called for the census that they ended up having to travel back to Bethlehem for. So this is the administrative ring of that person. Who knows, maybe he used this ring to seal the census question itself. I don't know.
McBride thinks these ancient coins have much to teach about modern times.
When I can look back at history and I can see the coinage of those eras and I can see the same stories happening to people, I guess it just, it makes me realize the same as it ever was, definitely.
Many Canadian veterans struggle with PTSD. How can the public be more educated on this topic? And what else can be done by the government to help? Brianna McCormack has that story.
Many of our veterans here in Canada have trouble getting the support they need when dealing with the aftermath of their trips overseas. I sat down with my very own uncle and godfather, Trent Corcoran, a Canadian veteran who was diagnosed with PTSD back in 2014 and now has a service dog named Paris.
I served 16 years in the military, and I was deployed overseas, 4 operational tours, one in former Yugoslavia and Kosovo, and I did 3 tours in Afghanistan operational. I retired in the summer of 2014 and my rank was infantry sergeant. I got Paris through Veteran Affairs, a clinical care worker that actually helps me out with a lot of paperwork. Got me the application to this organisation called Pass for Tot. And it's not government run or anything like that. As far as I know, like it's actually an organization that receives donations. I had to fly down to the States down in Kansas, and that's where I first met Paris, and she was 14 months old, pre-trained. She helps me day to day through anxiety, if I'm down and out, whereas I have depression, and just a great companion, just a backup buddy to have beside you.
I also chatted with Jamie McWhirter from PTSD Buddies to get some information on what services are out there.
One of the best ones I know in Canada for education with PTSD is called the Tema Foundation out in Ontario. Channel in Newfoundland is an excellent organization, but here in Newfoundland we go to one place, the Waterford. The Waterford in St. John's is not the most inviting looking building. I went in there once and it terrified me. I know someone with PTSD can be hard to live with. And a lot of times people with PTSD, they go and hide away. Sometimes it's hard for them to reach out, but if you throw a little lifeline, it helps.
McWhirter says there's lots of services out there for veterans and anyone struggling with mental illness. However, they're not very well known, and he feels the government doesn't do enough to support those services. Women and girls are constantly facing pressure to look a certain way. Have a skinny waist, have silky hair, or have the smoothest skin. With social media advancing, the pressure is only getting worse.
Instagram is one of the most popular social media platforms among girls and young women. Is it a harmless mobile app that is used for sharing photos, or is it a place to seek validation online? Erin Kenny is a local Instagram influencer and knows all about doing it for the gram.
I think that an influencer is just someone who puts out content that the people want to see.
Online lifestyles often seem glamorous, but they can be just the opposite for a person's mental health or body image. Kayla Hollett is completing her master's in experimental psychology and is a workshop coordinator for the I Love Me campaign, teaching young girls about self-love, social media use, and other issues that target them today.
When people get on, and particularly young girls get on, say, Instagram or Visco, they're looking at pictures of other girls, and a lot of times they'll follow accounts that have models or celebrities, and these pictures are edited and not really representative of what we look like on a day-to-day basis.
Body-altering apps are becoming increasingly popular. With a quick and easy download, they allow a person to change almost any feature. Kenny says while it's not her thing, there's no shame in using them.
I mean, to each their own. It's definitely not something that I personally like, but I mean, whatever makes you the most confident, to me, that's what it's all about.
While the pressure of meeting certain beauty standards isn't new, Hollett says social media takes this pressure to another level.
I think over time it has definitely gotten worse because I feel like the pressure to look good on social media has increased.
While it's fun to use these online platforms, it's important to remember not everything you see is realistic, and having these expectations will cause more harm than good. For Kicker News, I'm Chantel Murrin.
And that's our show for today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in on YouTube. We invite you to visit our website at kickercna.ca and follow us on Twitter at kickercna. And thank you again for joining us today. I'm Allan Bradbury, and
I'm Brianna McCormack, and we'll see you next week.